Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to show you probably the most painful game I'd ever played. And there are some games I don't want to show, and they cause a great deal of pain to when I show them, but I have to do it. I promised to do it, so I'm doing it. This is my round 5 game against an opponent I know well. He's a great guy, and I want to use this opportunity to apologize to him because both times we played games in the last 2 years, I ended up behaving like a moron and being obnoxious, not to him, but I was annoyed and I was unpleasant to be around after the games. Whew. Okay, so I started with d4. He played e6 and I played e4, allowing the French if he wants to go into the French, but he played the English or the Owen's defense. And I played what I think is the best line: bishop d3, bishop b7, followed by knight f3, and after c5, c3. White should now have a very pleasant advantage with a big center. cd, cd, bishop b4. This is all still theory, and it's fine. Knight f6, I have to defend the pawn, so queen e2. d5 and e5, giving the knight the e4 square, all perfectly fine. And I wasn't really familiar with this position anymore. There's a line here that I didn't know that's very good for white. Black's threatening to take a pawn, but they cannot take the pawn. If I go castles, then knight c3 is simply bad. So takes. If the bishop takes the pawn, then black is very close to losing. The bishop should really retreat. If bishop c3, then rook b1, and the bishop's going to end up on a5. After knight c6, for example, bishop a3, black cannot castle. The bishop is stuck and under pressure. And, well, let me just turn off the variation arrows and this stuff. And sorry about this, if, for example, they choose to take the pawn, then I take on d4, and after bishop takes d4, I have bishop b5 check, and that loses the queen. So this is a tricky tactical line, which I didn't know. So I played bishop d2 here, which is okay. White is still slightly better. I just didn't play the most precise line. He took on c3, I took back. He took on d2, I took back, and I was really happy with my position. This is a tremendous advantage for white. Knight d7, f4, and I want to play f5. So he played f5. I just took it. I want to keep the lines open. Queen takes f6, rook a e1, putting pressure on the e6 pawn. And he played rook a c8 with a counterattack on c3. I didn't want to trade queens, and I played rook f3, which sets up a little trick. If rook c3, then bishop h7 wins the rook. But I could have played f5 straight away. And on f5, I'm just threatening to take and win the knight because the queen would be attacked. So rook c3 would not be possible. So something like queen e7, f e6, knight f6, followed by queen e3, again setting up the same trick, would have won me a clean passed pawn, and this bishop is obviously bad, completely winning for white. The engine says +3. Instead I played rook f3, which is a big advantage anyway. Rook f e8, okay, bishop b1, finally defending the pawn and preparing to move my rook away if needed. He played bishop c6, and in this position I think there was a much cleaner way to play. I played knight f1, and my idea was to play knight g3, knight h1, knight f2, and knight g4. But I could have simply played rook e3 here, followed by knight f3, accomplishing the same, not the same strategic goal, but something even more unpleasant for black. After knight f8, knight f3, this is a complete blockade of the position. It's just a very, very bad French structure after f6, in which I'm sufficiently blockading the pawn, and I'm probably going to win the pawn. But okay, I played knight f1, which is okay. He played knight f8, defending the pawn. Once more, knight g3, g6, wants to prevent knight h5. Knight h1 going to f2, b5, a3, preventing any tricks with b4 and keeping the bishop bad. And in this position, even though white is much better, black played a move which loses straight away. He played queen e7. And I saw that he couldn't play queen e7 and that I had f5, and f5 just breaks through. I have the bishop, 2 rooks, and the queen, and the knight may be ready to jump in. And he's basically defending with rook, queen, and knight for the moment. So f5 just breaks through. E5 loses a pawn, g5 loses a pawn. What else can he do? He played g takes f5, but that's probably the worst of all, because I can take, the pawn is pinned. And then he took on a3. And I knew I had a win here. I was just trying to figure out what the easiest win was. You can pause the video here and just calculate win. There are 2 winning ideas here. So the most obvious one is bishop takes h7, which I didn't consider. Okay, I was focused on my idea, which is fine, completely winning, but this is even better. So if king takes, this is checkmate. I go rook g3 and black resigns. That's just it. It's going to be mate. If, I don't know, king h6, then queen g4 and checkmate. And alternatively, if knight g6 instead of king h6, it's a different type of checkmate. So the king cannot take. If the bishop isn't taken, then I have queen e5 winning. So knight takes is forced. And now queen e5 threatening mate. Rook e7, for example, is mate in 5. Just rook g3, king f7, followed by queen h5 check, and the king isn't running away. King f8, rook f1 check, and resigns. So bishop takes h7 would have been game over immediately. Instead I played rook g3, which is perfectly fine. He played king f7, the only move. If king h8, then queen e5 is mate, so king f7. And I played queen e5, just threatening mate. I mean, this is mate either with the rook or with the queen. He played the only move, rook e7, which I'd expected. And the bishop cannot be taken in any variation because the rook is now attacked. And I simply played knight f2. If, for example, knight f2, pawn takes bishop, then queen takes f5, king e8 is forced, and queen c8 loses immediately, what else to suggest? So I played knight f2. Instead of that, I had an immediate win, which I did not see. Queen h8. And after queen h8, black has 0 moves. Let's try king e8. After king e8, bishop e6. I don't know. I don't know what to suggest. If rook takes e6, then simply rook takes e6. That's loose. If king d8, for example, then queen takes f8. And it doesn't matter what you do. If rook e8, then queen a3 loses the queen. If bishop e8, then queen f4 probably is winning enough. I don't know. It's just a very bad position. I just need to transfer my queen to a more useful square. So queen h8, and if instead of ef5 he plays king e8 straight away, then bishop e6, and if ef5, then rook g7 check, king e8, and any rook takes on e7 is going to be busted. He has to give up the queen. Takes, and I just win. The queen is too strong compared to bishop and rook, and my knight's coming into the game, and I can pick up the f5 pawn with check, and the bishop is very bad, and the game is over. Instead, as I said, I played knight f2. This is still plus 4. It's still winning. He played king e8. Okay, and now I went wrong. This is the first point at which I made a mistake that reduces my advantage by a very significant amount. I played bishop b1, which was unnecessary. It's still +2 according to the engine, but the idea of discovery on the queen, which I did see, works because I can block the position with c5. So the correct idea was c4. The queen has to move. Let's say queen a5, and now c5. I couldn't see a logical follow-up to c4. I couldn't see the point, but c5 actually restricts all of black's pieces. And for example, queen c7, I can just go queen f6. If ef5 is played now, then I just go rook e3. I didn't see this. And I mean, what? There are no moves. If the rook is taken, then rook e3 is mate in 4. You either play king e5 or you play king d7 and get mated in 1. So yeah, this would have been game over. Instead, I played bishop b1. My opponent played king d7. I went knight d3, which is okay. Queen d6. And in this position, I was still winning. But I was getting extremely discouraged. I mean, I'm not trying to complain about anything. I'm just trying to share my thought process during the game. When you're having a rough tournament and you feel like you have a winning position and you can finally get back into the tournament, and then it's not so clear anymore, that's not an easy feeling to cope with, at least not for me. So staying objective and playing well is a feat strong players have. I don't have it yet. And being objective and playing as if you were playing round 1, move 1 of a new tournament would be ideal. But you have all that baggage of previous games and of chances in the current game that it's very hard to stay objective. So in this position, I played queen f6, which just leads to an equal position. Not that I knew that it was equal. I was just... I thought it was equal. I also thought that black could be better now, and I was just annoyed and discouraged. The correct move was knight c5. The king has to defend the queen, so king c7. And after knight a6, once again, the king has to defend the queen, so king d7. And now I move my queen away to e2. And the plan is bishop d3, win the pawn. And that's winning. When I win the pawn, the king is too exposed. My knight still has the c5 square. The king is stuck on d7. The knight cannot get into the game. Unfortunately, after queen f6, things don't work out that well. King c7, knight c5. But now my opponent has knight d7. And I kept preventing e5. I have to trade. I don't know what else to suggest. There simply aren't any other moves. I cannot take on e6. Because my queen is hanging. Yeah, so I have to take on d7. And now we shuffled our pieces. I would say black is slightly better, but I'm defending everything. And neither king is safe. He tried to break through. I prevented piece trades and prevented the breakthrough. I have to keep an eye on e5. f3 was hanging. f3 is hanging now, so it's defended. h4, h3, queen f8. He's trying to break through, but there really is no breakthrough. And I attacked the pawn, he defended it. And at this point, I went crazy. So I didn't want to draw, I wanted to fight for a win, but I couldn't figure out how. I don't see any active idea for white here. I just don't see it. So I decided to force open some lines, sacrifice more material, and hope for the best. My next move I knew was extremely bad, but I had to try something. I would have gladly risked defeat, which I did end up doing, instead of repeating and going for a draw. So I played c4. bc4 is risky because of queen a5 and the rook has the b file, so dc4. And here's the follow-up that doesn't work, but this was the idea. Queen a5, king d7, followed by d5. And I knew that he was going to play queen c5, pinning my rook, and there was going to be trouble here, but at least I get some open lines and some chances. All of that is very bad. White is now completely losing. I had no idea what the evaluation was. I assumed black was better. I didn't know it was this hopeless. So he played queen c5. I went rook e1. I have to defend my rook. And in this position, he took on f3, which is correct. G takes f3 is forced. Rook takes f3. I threw in d6, king e7, and I have to defend my rook, so queen d2. And queen g5 check. Queen g2 is the only move. It would have been more precise to take on g2 and then take on e3, but he decided to go rook g3, which is okay. Rook takes, queen takes, pawn takes, and a completely winning endgame for black. I tried, I played h4, bishop e6, h5, and in this position he could have just gone king d6. unpinning and queening his pawns. The king is too close to the pawn, so I cannot queen if I sack my rook for the bishop. Instead, he played king f7. I played h6, and in this position, he should have gone bishop d5, because my king stops the pawn. Instead, he went c3, and now it's equal. According to the engine, I went h7. He now has to go king g7, give up the bishop, takes. b4, still equal. Rook c6, the only move. And at this point, I was playing with seconds. Okay, so I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I had no idea whether this is a win for white, win for black, or a draw. I had absolutely no clue. The reason for that is, firstly, I'm not that good to know that immediately. Secondly, even if I were, I wasn't able to concentrate on anything other than preventing my flag from falling. So you're playing with 30 seconds each move. This is... I was just trying to make moves that don't lose on the spot. He played a5, I played king f1, a4, king e2, getting closer to the pawns. And in this position, he should have taken on h7 with a drawn position. So I'll show you why king h7 is a draw. King h7 is a draw because I now go rook c4. My king is close enough to all the pawns. If b3, I don't take on c3, I play king d3. And now after c2, I go king d2 and all the pawns have been stopped. If a3, then rook h4 check, the king has to go to the g file. I check the... I don't check here. This would be losing because of king f5. Instead, I can play rook h1. And now my rook is defending against all promotions. If a2, then king c3. And if the king tries to approach, I just take on b3 and all the pawns have been prevented. g2, rook g1, a1 queen and takes. And c1 queen and takes. And the king is close enough. I'm going to have to sacrifice my rook. Of course, seeing all of this with less than 30 seconds on the clock is not possible. In this position, he played b3. And I had an immediate win. Pause the video, find the win for white. Oh my god. Okay, please remember this position. So the win is very simple. You need your rook to defend against every pawn promoting. Your king is close enough if these get doubled on the second rank. So you go rook h6 and black resigns. That's it. King h8 is forced, otherwise it's going to be mate. And then rook h1. And all the pawns have been stopped. This is forced mate. There's absolutely nothing for black to do. Any pawn push, I just stop all the pawns. Here, king d3, I'm just going to pick up all the pawns. b2, I can take on c3. I don't know. Whatever happens, I'm just winning. Rook g2 and I go back. Instead of that, I played king d3. And king d3 is once again equal. In this position, he should have again taken on h7. With the same draw. Instead of that, he played c2. And at this point, I had my 30 seconds, they were running out, and on the board next to mine, two people have just finished their game and started shouting and analyzing, and I got down to 1 second and played, believe it or not, rook a6. I don't know why, it makes no sense. I was just seeing my flag falling, and I went rook a6 and resigned. Of course, the move makes no sense. Maybe I've written down rook a6, maybe it was on b6, maybe it was... In any case, I moved it away from defending c1 equals queen, which makes no sense. And again, having them shout over my shoulder it's not an excuse. I'm trying to give you perspective. And then I proceeded to sign the score sheets and angrily marched out of the tournament hall, completely disgusted with myself. So once again, I would like to apologize to Nenad, because I've been a bad sport and I behaved poorly. I should have behaved like a gentleman, accepted the fact that I played poorly in time trouble and throughout the game at some points, and just... In any case, instead of rook a6, once again, I have a winning position. I do the same thing, rook a6 and rook h6, sorry. If the pawn promotes, it's just mate. Because I queen we check and then the king is cut off. I just mate in 3 or in 2. And once again, this is forced. I go to h1 and black resigns. There are no moves. All the pawns have been prevented. For example, g2, rook g1, king h7, I don't know, king d2. And if a3, for example, king c3, and no pawns are moving forward, all the pawns have been prevented. I can take, I can do whatever I want. I'm just picking up all the pawns. The rook stops all of them. And eventually, black is going to run out of moves and resign. I'm very happy I got this over with. This game was played at the beginning of April, and it's the main reason I haven't been recording that much. I just find it very hard to show you insanely bad games like this one, and it took me a long time to recover from this. But now it's okay. And yeah, bad games are going to be a part of this journey, and there are going to be much worse games. Hopefully there are a lot more better ones than this. Yeah, laugh if you want, cry with me if you want. This is the game. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye bye.